Welcome to truly scary Tinder online dating stories. Smash like and subscribe to tread the thin line between reality and the surreal. Let's begin our eerie expedition. From the first moment he messaged me on Tinder, I thought Brian was the perfect match. Little did I know, my dream date was about to become my worst nightmare. In the bustling city where I lived, dating had always felt like a chore. After my last relationship ended, the idea of venturing back into the world of online dating was daunting. Yet there I was, swiping through profiles on Tinder, hoping to find a genuine connection. And then I matched with Brian Shaw. His profile picture showed a handsome man with a chiseled jawline and an impeccably trimmed beard, flashing a charming smile. His bio spoke of adventure, photography, charity work, globetrotting. We clicked instantly. His messages were witty and insightful, making me laugh and think in equal measure. We chatted every night, sometimes for hours. Brian was captivating. He told me about his work as a freelance photographer and how he supported an orphanage. His photos were breathtaking, each image telling a powerful story, and his passion for helping those kids genuinely moved me. After a few weeks, Brian suggested we meet in person. My heart raced with excitement and nerves. We decided on an upscale bar downtown. The ambience was sophisticated yet inviting, with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. I scanned the room, my eyes finally landing on the man who had become the center of my thoughts. "Emily, right?" he asked, flashing that same charming smile from his photos. I nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Brian, it's great to finally meet you." We settled into a corner booth, and our conversation flowed as effortlessly as it had online. Brian was even more captivating in person. His stories about his travels and the orphanage were so vivid. I could almost see the places and faces he described. As the evening progressed, I felt a deepening sense of connection. Brian was everything I had hoped for and more. By the end of the night, I was smitten. A couple of weeks later, we decided to meet again, this time for coffee at a cozy cafe. The weather had turned chilly, and I was bundled up in my favorite leather jacket and scarf. Brian arrived, looking as polished as ever in a tailored shirt and crisp chinos. "I've been thinking about you constantly," he admitted as he sat down, and I could feel my cheeks flush. "I've been thinking about you too," I replied, my heart pounding. Our conversation turned more personal. Brian shared stories of his challenging past, how he had lost his parents young and found solace in helping others. He pulled out his phone, showing me pictures of the orphanage, a humble building filled with bright-eyed children who adored him. My heart melted. "I hate to bring this up," he said with a heavy sigh, "but the orphanage is in trouble. They're facing a sudden financial crisis, and I'm out of options. I don't know what to do." My heart sank. I could see the genuine worry in his eyes. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I offered, not fully understanding the implications. Brian hesitated before replying. "If you could lend some financial support, just until I sort things out with my bank, it would mean the world to these kids." I didn't think twice. The connection I felt with Brian and his dedication to the orphanage spurred me to act. I wired him a significant sum of money the next day. But soon after, things started to change. Brian grew distant. Phone calls became rare, and our once lively conversations turned into brief, superficial chats. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I confided in my best friend Lisa, who advised me to be cautious. "Emily, are you sure about this guy?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I know it sounds crazy, but I trust him, Lisa. He's done so much for those kids. Why would he lie about that?" Lisa sighed. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt." Days turned into weeks, and Brian's distance only increased. I tried to rationalize his behavior. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe he was overwhelmed. But a nagging doubt began to fester. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, my phone rang. It was Brian's number. Relief washed over me, but the voice on the other end was not his. "Hello, is this Emily?" a woman's voice asked urgently. "Yes, who is this?" I responded, my heart pounding. "I'm Brian's wife. You need to know the truth about him." My mind reeled, and I could barely process the words. Brian's wife? He had never mentioned being married. "Wife?" I stammered, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" The woman on the other end took a deep breath. "Brian is not who you think he is, Emily. He's a con artist. He's been manipulating you. I found your number on his phone, and I thought you deserved to know." The room spun around me. I felt like I was falling into a dark, endless void. Manipulating me? No, that can't be true. He loves those kids at the orphanage. Her laugh was bitter. "What orphanage? It's all a lie, Emily. I've been tracking him for months. You're not the only one he's done this to. He preys on kind-hearted people, spins them a web of lies, and then cons them out of their money." Tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to scream, to deny everything she was saying, but deep down, I felt the painful truth settling in. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know. You need to understand who he really is. I've lost so much to him, too." I hung up, my hands shaking violently. My thoughts were a chaotic mess as the realization hit me like a freight train. Everything Brian had said, every heartfelt confession, every story of the orphanage, it was all a lie. Rage and humiliation crashed over me in waves. I quickly called Lisa, my voice cracking as I relayed the horrifying conversation. She arrived at my apartment within minutes, holding me as sobs racked my body. "We need to find out the truth, Emily," she said firmly, her eyes burning with determination. "He can't get away with this." Over the next few days, Lisa and I dove headfirst into investigating Brian. We combed through every detail he had shared. We scoured the internet for any information about him or the supposed orphanage. To our horror, we found articles and forums filled with stories of other victims, people just like me who had fallen for Brian's charm and deceit. The orphanage photos, every single one, turned out to be lifted from various charity websites. The stories he'd told me were eerily similar to those he had spun for other victims. In a moment of clarity, Lisa suggested we visit the cafe where Brian and I frequently met. Perhaps someone there recognized him and could provide more information about his whereabouts. When we arrived at the cafe, we showed the staff a picture of Brian, but none seemed to remember him. That night, I couldn't get any sleep, my mind restless and haunted. I decided to go through Brian's Instagram again, looking for anything I might have missed. To my utter disbelief, the account had been deleted. It was like he never existed. Feeling a combination of despair and resolve, I knew what I had to do next. I needed to track Brian down and confront him, regardless of the emotional toll. Lisa and I drove to the park where Brian had last mentioned being with his photography group. We wandered the trails, asking anyone we encountered if they'd seen him. Finally, a couple pointed us towards the secluded edge of the park. "There's a guy who fits that description. He often hangs out here taking pictures," they said. Hope and dread entwined within me as Lisa and I made our way to the edge of the park. There, amidst the trees, I spotted him. Brian was crouched, taking photos of a bird's nest. The man who had deceived me so profoundly now looked so ordinary, so unassuming. "Brian," I called out, my voice a mixture of anger and pain. He turned, surprise flashing in his eyes before he masked it with a serene smile. "Emily, what a lovely surprise." "Don't lovely surprise me, Brian," I spat, tears forming at the corners of my eyes. "I know what you've been doing. I know about the lies, the scams. I know everything." A flicker of panic crossed his face, but he quickly regained his composure. "Emily, listen, I can explain." "Explain?" I cut him off. "There's nothing to explain. You're a con artist, and I trusted you. You manipulated and used me." Brian took a step back, his eyes darting around as if plotting an escape. Lisa stepped forward, her fists clenched, ready to prevent it. "You're not running away, Brian," she said coldly. "You're facing this." But before we could react, he turned and bolted deeper into the woods, leaving us stunned and grasping at the empty air where he once stood. My breath came in short, painful gasps as I realized the full extent of his escape. He was gone, and in that moment I felt a mix of relief and utter devastation. The illusion had shattered, but the emotional wreckage remained. The authorities were skeptical when I reported everything. Brian's real name, his scams, the web of deceit he had spun, they seemed almost too elaborate to be real. I handed over every piece of evidence Lisa and I had gathered, hoping it would be enough to bring him to justice. But I knew how slippery he was, how effortlessly he had vanished. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional toll was immense. I barely slept, plagued by nightmares of his charming smile turning into a sinister grin. Trust, once a default, now felt like a distant memory. Each day felt like an uphill battle just to keep going. Determined to find some sense of closure, I began therapy. My therapist, Dr. Harris, was a kind woman with a calming presence. She helped me explore the depth of my betrayal, the violation of trust, and the wounds left behind by Brian's manipulation. One chilly afternoon, I sat across from Dr. Harris in her warmly lit office, clutching a cup of tea. "I feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Like he could appear at any moment, ready to spin another lie. Dr. Harris nodded, her expression empathetic. "Your feelings are completely valid, Emily. What you went through was traumatic. It's natural to feel paranoid and suspicious. Healing from this will take time." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I just want to move on, but it feels impossible. How can I trust anyone again?" "Trust is something that will rebuild itself slowly," she said softly. "It's important to give yourself grace and time. Surround yourself with people who genuinely care about you. They'll help you find your footing again." As the days grew into months, I followed Dr. Harris's advice. Slowly but surely, I began to reclaim pieces of my old self. I reconnected with activities I loved, taking long walks, engaging in amateur photography, and spending time with friends who uplifted me. Lisa, always by my side, remained my rock, her unwavering support a constant source of strength. One evening, as Lisa and I sipped on wine in my apartment, she looked at me with a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you think, you know. You've come so far." I smiled back, a genuine warmth filling my chest. "I wouldn't have made it without you, Lisa. Thank you for everything." Months later, another unexpected call came, this time from the authorities. There had been developments in the case. Brian, or whatever his real name was, had been flagged in another city for similar activities. The authorities were closing in on him. I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. While capturing him wouldn't erase the pain he caused, it would bring some semblance of justice and closure. It would prevent him from hurting others the way he hurt me. Eventually, the day came when I received the news I'd been waiting for. Brian had been apprehended. I sat in Dr. Harris's office, digesting the information. "You did it," she said gently. "You helped bring him to justice." A wave of emotions washed over me, relief, sadness, anger, and a bittersweet sense of closure. "It still hurts," I admitted, "but maybe now I can finally begin to heal." Dr. Harris nodded. "Healing isn't linear, Emily, but you're on the right path. You've taken control back from him, and that's incredibly powerful. In the face of all the pain and deceit, I found strength within myself I never knew I had. I was scarred, yes, but not broken. The experience had changed me, but it didn't define me. Slowly, I allowed myself to trust again, starting with those who had stood by me and moving forward with cautious optimism. Brian's manipulation had cast a long shadow over my life, but I had walked through that darkness and emerged stronger. I had learned to listen to my instincts and to value the genuine connections in my life. With time, I knew I would rebuild the trust that had been shattered. And as I closed the chapter on this painful experience, I looked forward to a future where kindness and authenticity would guide my path, leaving the nightmare of Brian's betrayal behind.
I never thought a single swipe right could lead to such terror, but the moment I saw my front door ajar, I knew my life had changed forever. Mike's voice echoed in my mind. "I'm always watching, remember?" The city lights shimmered as I strolled down the sidewalk, the crisp evening air filling me with anticipation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Mike. "Can't wait to finally meet you. See you at the rooftop bar." I couldn't help but smile. After weeks of flirty messages and late-night phone calls, meeting Mike in person felt like the logical next step. His profile had portrayed him as a charming and adventurous tech expert, his photos filled with mountain hikes, beach trips, and candid shots with friends. I pushed through the double doors of the bar and took the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, the bustling sound of chatter and laughter greeted me. The rooftop bar was stunning, with a panoramic view of the city bathed in twilight. And there he was. Mike stood near the bar, sipping on a drink, his posture confident and composed. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Claire?" he called, stepping forward. "Mike," I replied. my voice a mixture of excitement and nerves. He leaned in for a hug, his cologne crisp and inviting. "It's so good to finally meet you in person." We found a cozy spot by the edge of the rooftop, the city's skyline providing a breathtaking backdrop. Conversations flowed effortlessly. Mike was even more charismatic in person, his stories filled with humor and charm. His blue eyes were captivating, and I found myself lost in them as he spoke. "Claire, it's really nice to finally meet you. Makes it worth all the effort to get here," he said, his eyes twinkling. I brushed off the comment, attributing it to him being nervous or simply trying to impress me. The evening was magical, and I felt like I was in a romantic movie scene. Days turned into weeks, and Mike and I continued to see each other. He was attentive, always sending thoughtful messages and gifts. One evening, I came home to find a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep. The card read, "Just because you're amazing, Mike." I felt a blend of flattery and slight unease. Sure, it was sweet, but how did he know my address? I shook off the feeling, thinking he might have inferred it from our conversations. As the days progressed, I started noticing other peculiarities. I would receive Snapchat notifications indicating someone nearby had viewed my stories. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but when it began happening frequently, my nerves grew taut. One evening, as I was texting Mike about my day, he replied with a complete playlist on Spotify, filled with songs we had discussed. It seemed thoughtful, but oddly meticulous. My unease was growing, but his charm and attentiveness made it easy to dismiss the discomfort. After all, who wouldn't want someone who remembered the little things? One night, I returned home late from work. As I reached my apartment door, my heart nearly stopped. The door was slightly ajar. I stood frozen, a chilling fear creeping up my spine. I pushed the door open with trembling hands, scanning my apartment for any signs of intrusion. Everything seemed in place, but when I reached the living room, a gasp escaped my lips. The picture frame with a photo of my parents was lying face down on the table. My mind raced. Had I left it like that in the morning? No, I was certain I hadn't. Shaken, I fumbled for my phone and dialed Mike. His voice on the other end was unnervingly calm when he answered. "Claire, what's wrong?" My door was open, and someone flipped a photo of my parents," I stammered. "Don't worry," he soothed. "I'm always watching, remember?" The calmness in his voice turned my fear into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. "Mike, what do you mean by that?" I demanded. "Just that I care about you," he replied nonchalantly. "I always want to make sure you're safe." I hung up, my mind racing with paranoia. Mike's charm now felt like a mask hiding something far more sinister. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak, every shadow became Mike's presence in my mind. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare was just beginning. The days that followed were filled with unease. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications. Snapchat, Instagram, even Facebook. The same notification, "Mike Thompson viewed your story." It was as if he was everywhere, a constant shadow creeping into every aspect of my life. Walking through the city became an exercise in paranoia. I would catch glimpses of figures in the corner of my eye, Mike's piercing blue eyes haunting me in reflections and windows. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own life, unable to escape his omnipresent gaze. One afternoon, I was at my favorite cafe, attempting to lose myself in a book. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down to see another message from Mike. "You look beautiful today. Enjoying your coffee?" My heart skipped a beat, and I scanned the cafe, searching for him. There he was, sitting discreetly in the corner, a smile playing on his lips. The casual observer wouldn't have noticed him, but to me, his presence was suffocating. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast, and I bolted, leaving my book behind. I ran all the way to Mia's apartment at my safe haven in the storm. Mia opened the door, her expression turning serious the moment she saw my face. "Claire, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I burst into tears, recounting everything from the flowers to the Snapchat notifications and the terrifying encounter at the cafe. Mia listened intently, her eyes darkening with concern. "He was at the cafe, Mia, watching me. He knew I was there," I sobbed. Mia's face hardened with determination. "That's it. We need to go to the police. He's crossed the line from creepy to dangerous." We spent the evening gathering every piece of evidence we could. Screenshots, messages, photos. Mia was thorough and methodical, knowing we had to present a compelling case. The next morning, we walked into the police station, armed with our compiled evidence. But the officer behind the desk barely glanced at it before dismissing us. "There's not enough here to warrant a formal investigation. He hasn't done anything overtly threatening," the officer said, shrugging. Frustration and fear battled within me. "But he's stalking me. He's been in my apartment." Without solid proof, the officer was indifferent. We left the station, my fear now mingling with a sense of helplessness. That night, I huddled with Mia at her apartment, devising a plan. "We need more concrete evidence. Maybe catch him in the act," Mia suggested. Desperation clawed at me. How do we do that without putting ourselves in even more danger? Mia sighed, her brow furrowed in thought. "He's been following you, watching you. Maybe we can set a trap." I nodded, fear tightening my chest, but knowing we had no other choice. We spent the next few days meticulously planning, setting up cameras around my apartment and tracking Mike's patterns. Then came the night we decided to deploy our plan. I stayed at Mia's apartment, monitoring the live feed from the cameras we had set up. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Suddenly, movement on the screen caught my eye. A figure was at my door, fiddling with the lock. My breath hitched. "Mia, he's there." In anticipation, we watched as Mike entered my apartment, moving through the rooms with eerie familiarity. He paused in the living room, staring at the photo frame he had upturned before. The sight of him invading my space sent a shiver down my spine. "Got him," Mia whispered. "We need to call the cops now." We scrambled, dialing the police and relaying what was happening in real time. To our relief, they took the call seriously this time and assured us they were sending officers immediately. We waited, hearts pounding, as the police arrived at my apartment, catching Mike red-handed. As they dragged him away, he locked eyes with the camera, a twisted smile spreading across his face. I exhaled, a sense of triumph mixed with lingering terror. "It's not over, Claire," Mia said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "But at least it's a start." That night, as I lay in Mia's guest room, I replayed the events in my mind, knowing that while we might have won this battle, the war was far from over. Mike's presence would haunt me, a constant reminder of the fine line between charm and terror. The confrontation with Mike left me rattled, but a small part of me hoped it was finally over. However, the deep-rooted fear lingered. I had to reclaim my life, starting with moving out of my apartment. I stayed with Mia for a few days while I found a new place and upgraded my personal security. One evening, a month after Mike's arrest, I decided to return to the rooftop bar. I needed to confront my fears, to strip that place of its power over me. Mia insisted on coming with me, her presence a comforting anchor. As we arrived, the familiar sights and sounds of the city greeted us, but the place felt different, less magical, more sinister. We took a table in the far corner where I could see the entire room. Mia ordered drinks, her eyes scanning the bar with a protective vigilance. "Claire, you need to rebuild your life. Start with small steps," she encouraged. I nodded, trying to absorb her advice. We talked, laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I began to feel a semblance of normalcy. But then I saw it, a man at the other end of the bar, staring intently in our direction. My heart lurched, my breath catching in my throat. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his face, but the intensity of his gaze was unmistakable. "Mia, look," I whispered, pointing subtly. She turned, her eyes narrowing. "Stay calm. Let's see what he does." The man continued to watch, and as he started to move toward us, panic surged through me. Images of Mike flashed in my mind, and the fear of being cornered returned. Just then, Mia stood up, blocking his path. "Can I help you?" she demanded, her tone fierce. The man hesitated, looked taken aback, then mumbled an apology. "Sorry, thought you were someone else," he stammered before retreating hastily to the exit. My pulse raced, a bitter mix of relief and lingering dread. "Claire, it's okay. He's gone," Mia assured me, squeezing my hand. Time passed, and I moved into a new apartment, equipped with advanced security systems and cameras. The nightmares persisted, but therapy sessions provided some relief. I was learning to live with the scars, visible and invisible, that Mike had left. Mia remained a steadfast pillar of support, helping me integrate back into a semblance of normal life. We celebrated small victories, returning to favorite cafes, regaining routines, and even considering the idea of dating again, albeit with much caution. One evening, as I settled into my new apartment, feeling a rare sense of calm, my phone buzzed. It was a notification. An unknown number had sent a photo. My gut tightened as I opened it. The photo was of me, sitting in my living room, taken from outside my window. My vision blurred, and the room spun. The nightmare wasn't over. Mike's chilling words echoed once again. "I'm always watching, remember." I dialed Mia immediately, my voice trembling. "Mia, it's happening again. He found me." She rushed over, and we called the authorities, explaining the new development. They assured us they'd increase patrols in my area and advised me to stay somewhere safe for the time being. As Mia and I packed a few essentials for me to stay at her place, I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Every step felt heavy with the weight of Mike's invisible presence. Returning to Mia's apartment, I sat down, trying to breathe through the panic. The walls seemed to close in on me. How could he always be one step ahead? "Mia, what if it never ends? What if he's always there?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Mia knelt in front of me, her eyes fierce. "We will not let him win, Claire. We'll keep fighting, keep living our lives. You're stronger than you think." Her words wrapped around me like a shield, and for a moment, I believed her. We would keep going, keep fighting the darkness Mike brought into my life. The terror he inflicted would not define me. But as I lay in bed that night, the anonymous photo haunting me, I knew my battle was far from over. Mike was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I would have to be ready, always watching, just as he was.
Everyone warned me about the dangers of online dating, but I never imagined it would lead to a twisted game of cat and mouse with a man who knew my every move. It all started innocently enough. I was fresh out of a rough breakup, grappling with loneliness and a gnawing sense of emptiness. Friends suggested Tinder as a way to move on, so with a hopeful heart and a touch of trepidation, I created a profile. I quickly found myself swiping through faces, hoping to find a spark. And then, there he was, Nathan. Nathan's profile was magnetic. His photos exuded a warmth that drew me in, and his bio was filled with thoughtful quotes from books we both loved. We matched almost instantly, and within moments, a message from him popped up. "Hey Emma, I see you're a fellow Vonnegut fan. What's your favorite book by him?" His question felt genuine, unlike the usual pickup lines or lazy greetings. Conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: music, movies, childhood memories, and our dreams for the future. Nathan was a refreshing change from my ex. He was attentive, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. Our text exchanges gradually transitioned to late-night phone calls. Nathan's voice was soft, reassuring, and every laugh felt like a warm embrace. Though his camera was supposedly broken, he sent voice notes and pictures from various adventures. I felt an undeniable connection, a bond that felt almost too good to be true. Weeks passed in a blissful haze of virtual companionship. Finally, the day came when we decided to meet in person. Nathan suggested a quaint coffee shop in a small town, a 3-hour drive from my place. The thought of meeting him face to face filled me with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The morning of our meeting, I found myself driving through scenic backroads framed by autumn's vibrant hues. The beauty of the route did little to calm my nerves. My mind raced with scenarios, some delightful, others riddled with anxiety. By the time I reached the small town, my heart was pounding with anticipation. The coffee shop was just as Nathan had described, a cozy nook with rustic charm. I walked in and chose a seat by the window, watching the entrance, my eyes scanning every face that walked in. Minutes turned into an hour, and my phone buzzed with a message from Nathan apologizing for being late. As I waited, a barista with curly black hair and kind eyes approached me with a steaming cup of coffee. She smiled warmly before walking away, but a few minutes later, she returned, slipping a folded note onto my table. "Get out, now." Confusion gripped me. I looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. The barista's eyes were wide with what looked like fear or urgency. My pulse quickened, and I cautiously stood up, slipping the note into my pocket. I stepped outside, scanning the parking lot. Then I saw him. A man leaning against my car, much older and more menacing than the Nathan I had imagined. His eyes locked onto mine, his grin unsettling. "Emma, it's so nice to finally meet you," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Why don't you come over here?" My heart raced as cold fear washed over me. Using a rush of adrenaline, I turned on my heel and sprinted back to the coffee shop, desperately hoping for safety. I threw myself at the coffee shop door, only to find it locked. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the glass, hoping someone would hear. The older man's footsteps echoed behind me, each step a harbinger of doom. Suddenly, the door clicked open and the barista pulled me inside, locking it behind me. She led me to a back room, her grip firm but reassuring. My breath came in gasps as I tried to process what was happening. "I saw you waiting and recognized the signs," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You're not the first woman to come in here expecting to meet Nathan. My name's Mia, by the way." My mind reeled as I tried to wrap my head around her words. "Recognize the signs? What signs?" "Women come here waiting for a guy named Nathan. They describe him as charming, kind, perfect. But Nathan doesn't exist. That man out there? He's been doing this for a while, luring women to this place, and they never come back." My heart hammered in my chest. "How do you know all this?" Mia glanced towards the door, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "A friend of mine disappeared last year. She was supposed to meet a guy named Nathan. After that, I've kept my eyes open. When I saw you waiting, I knew I had to act." The reality of my situation hit me like a truck. Just a moment ago, I was hopeful, excited to meet someone I felt a real connection with. Now, I was fighting to comprehend that I had narrowly escaped a horrendous fate. "We need to call the police," Mia said, pulling out her phone. As she dialed, I noticed the older man still lurking outside, his eyes scanning the windows. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another message from Nathan. "You're lucky this time, but there's always a next." A shiver ran down my spine. Mia was talking to the dispatcher, giving them all the details. I listened, my brain struggling to catch up with the flood of information. The police would take a while to get there, but at least help was on the way. "Are you okay?" Mia asked, her eyes filled with concern. I nodded, though I felt anything but okay. As we waited, Mia shared more about the disappearances, painting a picture of a predator who used charm and psychological manipulation to lure his prey. The more she talked, the more I realized how close I had come to becoming another victim. When the police finally arrived, they searched the area but found no sign of the man who posed as Nathan. They took our statements, promising to investigate further. Despite their assurances, a part of me knew that the true Nathan was still out there, watching. As I was escorted to the safety of a police car, Mia's words echoed in my mind. Nathan didn't exist, but the danger was all too real. This experience had shaken me to my core, and I knew life would never be the same. As I sat in the back room, my phone buzzed again. Hesitation gripped me, but I forced myself to look. The message was from Nathan. "You can't hide forever, Emma. I know where you are." My blood ran cold. Mia saw my reaction and came closer. "What did he say?" I showed her the message, and she frowned, thinking quickly. "We need to notify the police. It shows he's watching, but doesn't mean he'll act with them around." The officers took the new information seriously, suggesting that Mia and I remain in the back room while they secured the area. I watched out of the corner of my eye as they combed through the cafe and surrounding streets. I felt trapped, suffocated by the walls around me, and the lingering dread that Nathan's eyes were still on me. Eventually, an officer returned and reassured us. "We couldn't find him, but we'll keep an ongoing investigation. We'll escort you home and place patrols around your neighborhood." Mia's presence beside me was a comfort, her determined gaze never wavering. "You're not alone in this, Emma," she said firmly. "We'll get through it." The drive back home was cloaked in a tense silence, my eyes constantly scanning the roads and alleys for any sign of danger. Once back at my apartment, the police did a thorough check before deeming it safe. Every creak of my apartment seemed louder, every shadow larger. I added more locks to my doors and windows, hoping they could keep out the creeping fear. But the night brought no solace. Memories of Nathan's messages and the older man's sinister smile haunted me. The following weeks were a blur of hypervigilance and paranoia. The area was patrolled, and interactions with the police became routine. Yet the feeling of being watched never left. Each day I checked my surroundings meticulously, never knowing which step would bring me back to that moment in the coffee shop. One night, a final note appeared at my doorstep, anonymous, unsigned. "You're safe for now, but I'm always watching." I shuddered, knowing I would never truly feel secure again. But through this ordeal, Mia became more than just a barista. She became a friend, a lifeline. We kept in touch, our shared experience forging an unbreakable bond. Emma Thompson was no longer the naive woman who sought solace in online dating. I emerged from the nightmare more guarded and cautious, forever scarred by Nathan's ghostly presence. As weeks turned into months, the police never found him. The memory of almost becoming another statistic hung over my existence, reminding me every day of the thin line between safety and peril. Nathan's shadow would always be there, lurking, a constant reminder of the horror that began with a single swipe on Tinder.
Part 1. The perfect match. They say love can blossom on Tinder. But what if beneath that flawless online profile lies a mind obsessed with watching your every move? I was sitting in my cozy apartment, an ordinary evening scrolling through Tinder while sipping a glass of Chardonnay. Having recently moved to the city and nursing a broken heart from my last relationship, I hoped to find a connection. Someone who could make me believe in love again. That's when I stumbled upon Jake's profile, his chiseled jawline beaming back at me, a mix of confidence and warmth in his smile. His bio was perfect too. Entrepreneur, world traveler, looking for someone to share adventures with. I swiped right, and to my surprise, it was an instant match. Within minutes, Jake messaged me. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and soon we were texting daily. His humor and charm were irresistible, and each message made me feel more special. After a week of captivating chats, we decided to meet. Our first date was at a chic downtown cafe. As I walked in, my heart skipped a beat seeing Jake in person. Tall, fit, with his dark brown hair neatly cropped short and those electric blue eyes that seemed to look right into my soul. He spotted me, stood up with an inviting smile, and hugged me as if we were long-lost friends. Throughout our date, the conversation never stalled. Jake was attentive, hanging on to every word I said, and shared fascinating stories of his travels and entrepreneurial ventures. By the end of the evening, I was smitten. "I'm really glad we met, Jessica," he said as we parted ways. "Let's do this again soon." "Absolutely," I replied, feeling a flutter of excitement. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I went on several more dates. Each one was better than the last. Whether it was a dinner at a trendy restaurant, a walk in the park, or a movie night, Jake always made me feel like the center of his universe. But then small, unsettling things started to happen. One evening, I noticed a silver Siddharth across from my apartment. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then it seemed like the car was always there, at odd hours, early morning when I left for work, late at night when I returned home. It felt like more than a coincidence. I brushed off the uneasy feeling, convincing myself it was just a neighbor's car. Another morning, I received a text from an unknown number. "Nice green dress. Have a great day." I froze, staring at my phone, panic rising in my chest. I was wearing a green dress, and the message came just as I stepped out of my building. I hadn't given Jake my number yet. We were still messaging through Tinder. I mentioned the text to Jake during our next date, laughing it off nervously. "Probably just one of your friends playing a prank," Jake said, his blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "Don't let it bother you." Trying to brush off my unease, I decided not to dwell on it. After all, Jake was right. Maybe one of my friends had somehow gotten my number and wanted to tease me. But as days passed, the texts continued, growing in detail. They mentioned my daily routines, the routes I took to work, even the music I listened to on my headphones during my morning run. It was unnerving, but they were still vague enough for me to doubt myself. Then, one evening, as I walked to my apartment building, the familiar silver sedan caught my eye again. Only this time, it felt more sinister. I pretended not to notice the car and hurried inside. My heart pounded as I quickly locked the door behind me. Trying to shake off the paranoia, I poured myself a glass of wine and sank into the couch, hoping a movie would distract me. The uneasy feeling didn't go away. In part 2, descent into paranoia. The days went by, but the unsettling feeling of being watched never left me. One Friday evening, I received another cryptic message. Loved the way you hummed to that song this morning. My blood ran cold. This wasn't information anyone should know. I hadn't told a soul about my morning routine, much less my habit of humming along to my favorite tunes as I made breakfast. Fear gnawed at me as I reread the message. That night, I tossed and turned in my bed, sleep evading me. When I finally drifted off, it was only to be jolted awake by a sound outside my window. I crept to the window and peered out, but saw nothing. Paranoia consumed me. I knew I needed to talk to Jake. Maybe he could help ease my mind, remind me that it was all just a series of coincidences. We met the next evening at our favorite Italian restaurant. I told him about the increasingly invasive messages, watching his reaction closely. "Jessica, you're probably overthinking this," he said soothingly, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "It's just a prank or maybe some automated scam texts. I can help you report it if you'd like." I nodded, but something about his calm demeanor didn't sit right with me. Despite his reassurances, the fear lingered. A week later, as I returned home after a late night at work, I noticed something odd. My apartment door was slightly ajar. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitated at the threshold. I pushed the door open and stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been here. I reached for the phone, dialing Rachel's number with shaky hands. "Jessica, you need to be more careful," Rachel said, her tone stern. "Change your locks and report this to the building manager. You should also consider contacting the police if this continues." Taking her advice, I immediately contacted my landlord to change the locks. I hoped that would be the end of it, but my nightmares were far from over. Another series of chilling text messages came through the next day, more specific than ever. "Saw you speaking to Rachel today. Interesting conversation." My skin crawled. They knew about my private talk with Rachel, something that happened inside the safety of my apartment. It was then I realized this wasn't a random prank. This was targeted. Desperate and terrified, I decided to follow Rachel's suggestion and contacted the police. I recounted the bizarre messages, the repeated sightings of the silver sedan, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. The officers took my statement seriously and launched an investigation. That same evening, they called me with an urgent update. They had traced the messages back to Jake's phone. Stunned, I sat down, my mind racing. How could Jake, the man who made me feel so special, be behind this? It felt like a nightmare. The officers explained further. Their investigation revealed Jake had been using my Wi-Fi to control hidden cameras he had planted in my apartment. He had been watching my every move. Shattered by betrayal, I called Rachel immediately. "You were right," I said, my voice trembling. "It was Jake all along. He's been watching me through hidden cameras." "Oh my God, Jessica. Pack your things right now and get out of there. Come stay with me. We'll figure this out together." Panic and anger swirled within me as I hurriedly packed a bag. I couldn't spend another minute in that apartment. Grabbing essentials, I fled to Rachel's place, leaving behind the place I once called home. Part 3. Haunting Aftermath. Moving in with Rachel was a temporary relief. She was a rock, helping me navigate the police investigation and legal proceedings to get a restraining order against Jake. But the damage had been done. My sense of security was shattered. A few weeks later, I found a new apartment, determined to rebuild my life. I made sure it was in a secure building with updated security measures. Still, I couldn't shake off the paranoia. Every creak, every shadow in the corner of my eye sent chills down my spine. I tried to establish a routine, hoping familiarity would help restore my peace of mind. I deleted all my social media accounts and got a new phone number. Rachel helped me unpack, and we tried to make the place feel like home by arranging furniture and putting up some cheerful decorations. But deep down, the fear lingered. It was a quiet Sunday evening when I sat in my living room trying to relax with a book. My new Wi-Fi device and laptop were set up nearby, ensuring a seamless connection for work and leisure. Yet, as I read, an unsettling feeling washed over me. Dismissing it as residual anxiety, I continued reading, trying to lose myself in the story. Suddenly, I heard it, a a faint, barely discernible whisper. My blood turned to ice as I realized it was coming from my Wi-Fi device. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear the words. It was indistinct but chillingly familiar. I shot up from the couch and approached the device with trepidation. The whisper grew slightly louder. It was as if someone was speaking through the connection, a ghostly echo from my recent past. Panic surged through me, and I quickly shut down the device. Breathing heavily, I backed away and grabbed my phone to call Rachel. Rachel, I heard something. It's coming from my Wi-Fi. What if he's still watching me? Stay calm, Jessica, Rachel said, her voice steady. Disconnect everything and come over. We can figure this out together. I followed her instructions, packing a few essentials in a hurried frenzy. I couldn't believe this was happening again. As I shut my laptop and pulled the plug on my devices, I couldn't help but feel like I was right back where I started, in Jake's grip. I double-checked my locks before leaving, my fear almost tangible. The streets outside felt eerily quiet as I made my way to Rachel's place. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat that only I could perceive. When I finally arrived, Rachel embraced me, her presence a fleeting comfort amidst my turmoil. We spent the night discussing what steps to take next, but my mind kept straying back to the whispers from the Wi-Fi. The next few days were a haze of anxiety and sleepless nights. I couldn't stay at Rachel's forever and needed to tackle this head-on. With Rachel's help, I contacted a cybersecurity expert who assured me that he would thoroughly sweep my devices for any traces of surveillance. The expert's assurance helped, but I knew my trust had been irreparably damaged. Even simple, everyday actions became a source of paranoia. The city that once seemed vibrant and full of opportunities now felt like a labyrinth of potential threats. As time passed, I thought about moving again, perhaps to a different city, to outrun the shadows of my past. But deep down, I realized my true battle was within, against the fear and paranoia that Jake had instilled in me. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, I tried to focus on a painting I had begun. My laptop, now scrubbed clean, sat innocuously on the table beside me. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the fan. I forced myself to breathe deeply, pushing away the invasive thoughts. Just then, a soft chime broke the silence, an email notification. I hesitated, fear gripping me, before slowly opening my laptop. The subject line read, "See you soon." With a sense of dread, I read the brief email, the words sending a shiver down my spine. As tears blurred my vision, I snapped the laptop shut, the sense of being watched lurking ever closer. I realized then that while I could try to escape, the threat Jake posed would always be there, an unrelenting shadow in the digital world. But instead of cowering, I promised myself I would fight back, ensuring he could never control my life again. The battle against my paranoia was just beginning, and while the whispers in the dark might never fully fade, I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. The end is never certain, but in that moment, I chose to reclaim my future. It was supposed to be a simple photo walk with a new Tinder match, a shared passion turning into a nightmare I could never have photographed. I remember the sense of anticipation I felt that morning, checking my camera bag meticulously, ensuring the batteries were fully charged and my favorite lenses were clean and ready. The autumn light was perfect for the kind of shots that I envisioned capturing with Mark, someone who seemed to grasp the intricate shadows and soft light that so often escapes the untrained eye. We had met on Tinder, and something clicked right away, or so I thought. He shared a collection of his work with me, dark, moody photographs that I admired for their aesthetic, if not for the slightly eerie undertones that I brushed off as artistic expression. With each ding from my phone signaling a new message from him, my excitement for the day's plan grew alongside a subtle curl of nervousness in my gut. By the time I left for the local bustling park where we agreed to meet, I had successfully calmed my nerves. I convinced myself that the slight unease was just a typical jitters before meeting someone new. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my camera bag on my shoulder like an old friend, anchoring me to the familiarity of my craft. The park was awash with activity. Children playing on the swings, couples strolling hand in hand, artists trying to capture the essence of a warm fall afternoon on canvas. Amid the parsecs of scents and sounds, I found myself wandering around looking for Mark, the person I knew only through bits of electrified conversation and polished profile pictures. I spotted him near a rustic bridge over a duck pond, unmistakable with his disheveled light brown hair and that intense gaze which had felt so magnetic online. Mark's eyes lit up as he saw me, a wide grin spreading across his face as he gestured enthusiastically to his camera, already slung around his neck. "Jamie, you made it? This light, isn't it perfect?" His voice was full of warmth that immediately put my lingering nerves to rest. We started walking along the meandering paths of the park, cameras in hand, stopping occasionally to capture what caught our fancy. He was right. The golden sunlight filtering through the leaves created a mesmerizing play of light and shadow, and the richness of the fall colors made every shot look like a painter's dream. As we walked, Mark shared funny anecdotes from his travels, his laughter easy and infectious. I found myself relaxing, engaging in the rhythm of selecting angles, adjusting settings, and releasing the shutter. Photography has always been my retreat, and sharing it with someone who understood its charm was refreshing. We clicked photograph after photograph, losing track of time as the shadows lengthened and the park slowly emptied, whispering secrets to the encroaching darkness of the evening. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, dyeing the sky with hues of orange and purple, Mark suggested a change in scenery. "I know a spot nearby, an old building. It's been abandoned for years, but the structure is safe. The way the evening light plays through the broken windows is something else. Would you be up for it?" His eyes sparkled with an adventurous glint that I found hard to resist. With a slight hesitation, pushed away by an urge not to seem unadventurous, I nodded. "Sounds intriguing," I replied, curious despite the ominous feeling that began to knot in my stomach. We left the populated park, the sounds of laughter and life gradually replaced by the haunting silence of desolation as we approached the building. It loomed large and foreboding, its once proud structure now a skeleton of decay. As we entered, the air grew cooler, the broken glass and debris crunching under our feet, breaking the heavy silence. Inside, the dying light filtered through shattered windows, casting eerie shadows that danced on the graffiti-laden walls. It was an urban photographer's trove, and initially, my apprehension was overshadowed by the thrill of capturing such a unique location. Mark led me through different rooms, each one more derelict than the last. He was right. The photographic potential was incredible. But as we ventured deeper into the maze of abandoned rooms, I began to feel uneasy. Mark's demeanor shifted subtly. His usual chatter faded into a more reserved tone, his glances becoming more calculating, less warm. I shook off the unease, attributing it to the unsettling surroundings. The turning point came when Mark suggested I check out a particular room while he explored another area to set up a shot. Alone, I stumbled upon his camera, lying on an old, dusty table. Curiosity overcame my better judgment, and I flipped through the recent images on his digital display. What I saw chilled me to the bone. The photos weren't just of forgotten rooms and broken windows. They were zoomed-in shots of people, taken without their knowledge, their expressions ranging from distracted to deeply personal moments. The voyeuristic nature of the photographs was undeniable and unsettling. Frozen with shock, I hardly heard Mark return until he was right beside me. "Like what you see?" His voice, once friendly, now dripped with something dark and menacing. The room felt suddenly colder, the playful shadows now sinister as they crept along the crumbling walls. Fear clenched my gut, and I tried to mask my horror with a nervous laugh. Before I could say anything, Mark stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "It's thrilling, isn't it? Capturing the essence of people when they think nobody's watching?" He grinned, but there was no warmth in it. I backed away, bumping into the table. That's when he moved swiftly, pushing the door shut and turning the key with a chilling click of finality. "Don't worry," he whispered, his breath cold on my face. "You'll learn to appreciate it too." Panic surged as I realized I was trapped. With my heart hammering against my ribs, I watched helplessly as Mark slid the key into his pocket, his smile widening into a grin that didn't reach his unnerving green eyes. Frantically, I searched the room for any means of escape. my breath quick, shallow, the walls seemingly inching closer with each of Mark's steps back towards me. But amid the clutter and debris, my eyes caught a glimmer of hope. A small, rusted screwdriver lying half hidden under a fallen beam. Without a moment's hesitation, I darted for it, my fingers wrapping around the cold metal. Mark's laugh echoed through the room, low and unsettling as he watched me scramble, but the condescending smirk dropped when he realized my intent. With the screwdriver in hand, I approached the locked door, heart pounding as I jammed the tool into the keyhole. Working against time and fear, I twisted and turned it, praying for the mechanism to give. Each second stretched infinitely as Mark advanced, his own brand of terror painted clearly on his face. But then a small click, a sound sweeter than any melody, filled the room as the lock disengaged. I didn't pause to savor the victory. I shoved the door open and spilled into the dimly lit corridor, my legs carrying me faster than they ever had. The chase was brief. Mark, caught off guard by my sudden escape, was slow to react. I burst from the building into the twilight, sucking in lungfuls of fresh air, every cell in my body urging me to put as much distance between myself and that horrid place. By the time I dared glance back, the building was nothing but a dark silhouette against the night sky, and Mark was nowhere in sight. I didn't stop running until I reached the more populated streets, vibrant with the nightlife of the city. Only then did I allow myself to slow down, my body trembling uncontrollably from adrenaline and relief. A nearby police station beckoned as a sanctuary, and I stumbled towards it, the weight of what had transpired beginning to truly sink in. Inside, under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, I recounted everything to a disbelieving pair of officers. The investigation that followed would reveal the depth of Mark's deception and the darkness of his hobbies. They never caught, but my statement joined a growing pile of similar accounts from other unlucky souls who had crossed his path. The terror of that night lingered long after. My cameras, once instruments of joy, now served as reminders of the ordeal. Yet with time, the lens that had once captured the beauty of the world began to reclaim its purpose. I leaned into the strength I never knew I had, a strength born of survival. In the quiet moments just before sleep claimed me, I often found my gaze lingering on the shadows at the edges of my room, a reminder, perhaps, of the darkness that lurks just beyond the light, just out of sight, waiting. But no longer did I feel helpless. I had captured my worst fears through the eye of my lens and emerged, not unscathed but undeterred, ready to face whatever else might come.
Imagine finding the perfect connection, only to discover your dream date is your worst nightmare. I had always been a romantic at heart, hoping to find that one person who understood me, shared my passions, and could wander with me under the stars, talking about everything and nothing all at once. When I stumbled upon Julie's Tinder profile, it seemed like fate. Her smile lit up her pictures, photos of travels to far-flung places filled her gallery, and her bio hinted at a deep, vibrant soul. We clicked instantly over our chats, which turned into late-night phone calls, and before I knew it, I was smitten. Perhaps this was what I had been waiting for. The day we decided to meet was clear, with an evening breeze that promised a night of comfortable stargazing. I dressed in my best casual outfit, a crisp blue button-up shirt paired with dark jeans, a touch of cologne, and a nervous excitement that tingled through my veins. I grabbed the telescope I had borrowed from a friend, picturing how Julie's eyes would light up at the surprise. I couldn't help but rehearse the evening in my head as I drove to the secluded park she had suggested, the perfect spot away from the city lights. As I pulled up to the designated meeting point, my heart was pounding with anticipation. There she was, or who I thought was she, standing under the dim light of the park's entrance. But as I approached, the silhouette seemed off, and a sinking feeling started to gnaw at my stomach. "Julie," I called out, my voice tinged with a mix of hope and caution. The person turned around and my heart dropped. It wasn't the woman from the pictures, but a man, his nervous smile wavering as our eyes met. "Hi, Brian, I guess I owe you an explanation," he stammered, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose awkwardly. His voice was familiar, the same warmth and intonation I'd fallen for, but everything else was wrong. Confusion twisted inside me like a knife. "You're not Julie," I managed to say, my voice a mix of betrayal and shock. How could this have happened? Why would someone deceive me this way? He looked down, his hands fidgeting. "I'm Mark. I used my ex-girlfriend's profile. I thought if you got to know me first, who I really am on the inside, you'd like me." The world around me seemed to spin. I had opened up to her, in ways I hadn't with anyone in a long time, and it was all based on lies. I needed to get out of there. "I can't do this," I said, turning back toward my car, the uneasy feeling in my gut turning into dread. But as I reached my car, my heart sank further. Each tire was flat, slashed cleanly through. Panic gripped me as I realized the night had only just begun. As the reality of my sabotaged car set in, the chill of the night air seemed to seep deeper into my bones. Panic was quickly replaced by a sharp sense of vulnerability. I was stuck. The park around me bathed in shadows, and the faint sounds of nature eerily distorted in the tense silence between us. Mark's expression shifted from apologetic to something darker as he noticed my discovery. "You can't leave now," he said, his tone unsettlingly calm. "We barely got to talk, Brian. Isn't that what you came here for? To meet me?" "No," I shot back, trying to mask the fear creeping into my voice. "I came to meet Julie. You're not her. You lied." He took a step closer, and instinctively I stepped back, my mind racing for options. He noticed my retreat and paused, his face a confusing mix of hurt and anger. "I thought you'd understand, Brian. I thought you'd be different." His words hung heavily in the air, charged with an intensity that made my stomach churn. I had to think. The main road was too far to run without being caught, especially with Mark likely knowing this area better than I did. My eyes darted around, desperate for something, anything that could help. Deciding I needed a barrier between us, I edged towards a dense cluster of trees, dodging his attempts to close the distance. "This isn't what understanding looks like, Mark. You've scared me, not endeared yourself." As I backed away, he followed, his demeanor oscillating wildly between pleading tones and aggressive gestures. "I just wanted someone to see me. Do you know what it's like to be so lonely that you have to become someone else to get noticed?" His words might have struck a chord on any other night, under any other circumstances. But fear was a loud, overriding scream in my mind now. Any sympathy I might have had drowned out by the urgency to escape. When he took another step forward, a branch snapped under his foot in the darkness, giving me the moment I needed. I turned and ran deeper into the woods, guided only by the moonlight that barely filtered through the leaves. The woods became my temporary sanctuary, the sounds of Mark's calls fading as I put distance between us. My heart pounded against my chest like it wanted to escape just as much as I did, my breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. I needed a plan, but first, I needed to catch my breath and think without fear clouding my judgment. But every shadow seemed to twitch with danger, every rustle of the leaves a potential threat. Finally, hiding behind a large oak, I took out my phone with trembling hands. No signal. I cursed under my breath, the isolation of the park now feeling more menacing than ever. I was truly alone, but I couldn't give in to panic. Not yet. I had to keep moving, find some way to call for help, because somewhere out there in the dark, Mark was still looking for me. Creeping quietly along a narrow path, I chose every step with care, aware that any noise could betray my position. The darkness was a double-edged sword, concealing me but also obscuring my vision. I constantly looked over my shoulder, expecting Mark to emerge at any moment. His obsession, which had once seemed like attention and care in our messages, now morphed into something monstrous in the flesh. After what felt like hours but must have been only minutes, I glimpsed a small light in the distance. An old park ranger station, seldom used but possibly a place to finally call for help. Reinvigorated by this glimmer of hope, I pushed through the underbrush, scratches from the branches marking my arms and face as I hurried toward salvation. Reaching the station, I pried open the weather-beaten door and rushed inside, quickly bolting it behind me. Scanning the room, I found an old landline phone on a dusty desk. My fingers, though shaking, managed to dial 911. I whispered into the receiver, explaining my situation and location as quietly as I could, every creak of the old building sending chills down my spine. The operator's voice was calm and steady, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of the night. "Help is on the way. Stay on the line," she instructed. I sank to the floor, the phone my tether to safety, as I listened to the distant sound of sirens growing louder. Then, a shadow passed by the window, and my breath hitched. Mark's silhouette loomed against the glass, his face distorted in a grotesque mask of anger and desperation. The terror I felt then was primal, a cold fire spreading through my veins. But the approaching sirens seemed to deter him. His figure retreated into the darkness, leaving me alone with the echo of his footsteps and my ragged breathing. The wait for the police to arrive was torturous, each second stretching out endlessly. When they finally did, their flashlights cutting through the night like beams of solid hope, I had never felt such profound relief. They found Mark hiding nearby, his surrender to them a silent admission of his guilt. As I rode back to the police station, the night's events replayed over and over in my mind. The betrayal, the fear, the fight for survival, it all distilled into a bitter lesson about the deceptive veil of digital personas. The next day, as I returned home, the park's serene beauty was a stark contrast to the dark terrors it had concealed. My views on online dating, trust, and how well you can truly know someone through a screen were irrevocably changed. While I was safe now, the shadows of that night lingered, a haunting reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear are just a screen swipe away.
As the last sunlight flickered through the dense pine trees, painting streaks of gold across the dusty cabin floor, I couldn't shake off the chill that climbed up my spine and whispered warnings into my ear. Taylor, with his startling blue eyes and charismatic smile, stood in the doorway, watching the sunset. We had driven up to this secluded getaway in the mountains, a spot he'd suggested spontaneously. An adventure, he said. And as much as I played along, soaking in the breathtaking views and his seemingly perfect company, a nagging voice in my head kept questioning how well I really knew this person I'd met on Tinder just a few weeks ago. We had talked every day since our match. Taylor was witty, attentive, and shared an uncanny amount of my interests. For me, a freelance journalist used to ferreting out stories from shadows, Taylor felt like a narrative I wanted to believe in, perhaps too eagerly. That evening, after our small dinner cooked over an open fire, Taylor suggested a walk into the woods, a shortcut to a view he claimed was worth the trek. Hesitating at the threshold of the dimly lit woods, an unsettling memory of a childhood story crept into my mind, the one where breadcrumbs didn't save the lost, they betrayed them. As we walked through the crinkling, dry underbrush, Taylor leading with confidence uncharacteristic of a first-time visitor, we finally emerged onto a rocky overlook. The view was indeed breathtaking, the entire valley unfolding under the hues of twilight. He stepped close, his hand brushing mine, pointing out distant landmarks. But amidst the beauty, that eerie feeling persisted, an instinctive alertness pricking at the back of my neck as he wrapped his arm around my shoulder a bit too firmly. "Beautiful, isn't it? Just like I told you," he whispered, his voice smooth as the dusk air. But how could he have known? His familiarity with a place he'd claimed to have found on something as whimsical as a blog post, the precision of his memories, that was the twist in his tale I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, the thrills of a budding romance were muddling with the chills of doubt, pushing my mind to reel back through every word exchanged, every plan laid down since our digital paths had crossed. That night, as a cold wind rattled the wooden shutters of the cabin, I lay wrapped in a woolen blanket, trying to convince myself that the unease clawing at my gut was just the reaction to an alien environment. But sleep eluded me, chased away by shadows that seemed alive in the corners of the room. Around midnight, awakened by the sudden silence that fell over the cabin, I noticed Taylor's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold. I called out, but received no answer, only the eerie echo of my own voice against the empty walls. Pulling on my boots, I ventured out of the warm bedroom, my heart thudding rhythmically with each creak of the wooden floorboards underfoot. The fire had died out to glowing embers, casting a weak, flickering light in the living room. His phone lay on the kitchen counter, which was odd, considering how inseparable he was from it. Driven by a mix of worry and curiosity, I picked it up, only to find that his call logs and messages had been wiped clean except for one number, mine. A shiver ran down my spine, not just from the chill of the night. I started to search the cabin, driven by a growing sense of dread. Behind a loose panel under the sink, I discovered unsettling evidence. Several driver's licenses with Taylor's picture, but different names, alongside newspaper clippings detailing unsolved disappearances. The light of my discovery was harsh and glaring, a stark contrast to the romantic narrative that had led me here. My mind raced as I pieced together the horrifying truth. Taylor was not who he claimed to be. He was a chameleon, adapting his persona to lure unsuspecting victims. A floorboard groaned, snapping my attention to the present. Heart pounding, I scrambled to replace the panel just as Taylor stepped into the cabin. His smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze that didn't seem to recognize me. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice flat, the warmth it used to carry now a distant echo. I nodded, gripping the flashlight a little tighter. "Just needed some water," I replied, striving to keep my voice steady. I couldn't let on that I knew. Not yet. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. The tension in the cabin built with the storm outside, the rolling thunder mirroring the chaos brewing between us. Every word, every movement felt weighed down with the gravity of my terrifying realization. Taylor watched me, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he sensed my shift from infatuated to wary. I excused myself, muttering about needing some fresh air, desperate for a chance to think away from his scrutiny. Outside, the night was pitch black, the forest alive with the howls of the wind and the rustle of leaves. My mind raced as I paced, trying to formulate a plan. Then, a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate, a set of headlights bobbed in the distance along the lonely mountain road. I made a split-second decision. I needed to get out now. As I darted towards the road, the loose gravel crunched loudly under my feet, a telltale sound in the silent night that I instantly regretted. Behind me, the cabin door slammed open, Taylor's voice cutting through the storm, calling out my name with a mix of anger and desperation. Panic lent speed to my legs as I sprinted toward the approaching car, waving frantically. My breaths came in sharp gasps, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. The car, a battered old pickup, screeched to a halt, and the driver, an older man with wary eyes, hesitated only a moment before shouting, "Get in!" I leaped into the passenger seat, not daring to look back, as the truck accelerated, gravel spitting from beneath the tires. As we drove away, the driver, introduced as Sheriff Clark, glanced at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Between heavy breaths, I explained everything: the Tinder match, the getaway, the disturbing discoveries. He listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grim as he turned the truck around, heading back towards the cabin with red and blue lights cutting through the mist. When we arrived, backup was already there, securing the scene. Taylor was in handcuffs, a mask of fury replacing his usual suave demeanor. Sheriff Clark led me away, ensuring I saw the rescue, adding, "You did the right thing, coming forward. He's been wanted for months." The relief was palpable, but as I watched Taylor being escorted into a police cruiser, his gaze found mine. It was a look that I would never forget, one that chilled me to my core, promising that this was not the end. I turned away, the sheriff's assurance echoing in my ears, yet a cold dread lingered. I knew my journey into trust would never be the same again, the shadows of that night forever etched in my mind, a reminder of how close I had come to being a mere footnote in a sinister chapter of an unchecked predator's life.
The reflection of the setting sun cast elongated shadows across the sparse living room of my new apartment, a physical manifestation of the loneliness that had become my constant companion since moving. Just as I resigned myself to another evening alone, my phone vibrated with a new message. A glimmer of hope sparked within me as I saw who it was from: Sarah, my Tinder match. But the message contained only 2 words that chilled me to the core: "Help me." It was the last communication I would ever receive from her. Our story began like any modern tale of potential romance, in the digital world of swipes and instant messaging. Sarah's profile was a beacon of light in what felt like an endless sea of incompatibility. Her photos radiated warmth, each smile and pose suggesting a kindred spirit longing for connection. Our conversations quickly deepened, shifting from interests and hobbies to dreams and fears. With each interaction, my isolation felt less suffocating, replaced by an anticipation for every new notification. Excitement and anxiety warred within me as we made plans to meet in person for the first time. We agreed on a quaint cafe known for its cozy atmosphere and artisan coffee, a neutral ground where our digital chemistry could hopefully translate into the physical world. The day arrived, and I found myself at the cafe, nervously adjusting my shirt and running my fingers through my hair for the umpteenth time. But as minutes turned to hours, the warmth of anticipation cooled into the chill of realization. Sarah was not coming. Determined not to let worry cloud my judgment, I convinced myself there must be a plausible explanation. Yet, as I reached for my phone to check for any messages explaining her absence, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Not only had Sarah not messaged, but her Tinder profile was also gone, disappeared without a trace. Attempting to call her only led to the sterile tone of a disconnected line. Desperation gripped me as I returned to my apartment, the shadows now feeling more oppressive than before. My apartment, once a refuge, felt cavernous and empty as I powered up my laptop and began scouring the web for any sign of Sarah. Hours blurred into days as my initial worry morphed into an obsession. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when I stumbled upon a missing persons report. The face staring back at me from the dim glow of the computer screen was undeniably Sarah, yet the name listed was not Sarah. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The woman I had been conversing with, the woman with whom I had shared my deepest thoughts, had been using the identity of someone who had vanished over a year ago. Part 1 ends here. The revelation of Sarah's true identity, or rather, the stolen identity she had presented to me, sent shockwaves through my mind. The loneliness that had driven me to Tinder in the first place now paled in comparison to the horror of realizing I had been drawn into something far more sinister. My search for companionship had unwittingly led me to the dark underbelly of digital dating, a place where identities were as easily fabricated as they were stolen. Determined to uncover the truth, I contacted the police, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number. The call connected me with Detective Marcus, a seasoned officer whose voice bore the weight of too many years spent unraveling the worst of human deceit. I explained my situation, from the innocent beginnings to the chilling discovery, expecting skepticism or dismissal. However, Marcus listened intently, a silent acknowledgement that this was not his first encounter with the darker aspects of online connections. We met at the precinct, a building as weathered and worn as the detective himself. Marcus's sharp gray eyes scrutinized me as I entered, no doubt assessing whether I was another victim or perhaps something more complicit. The initial tension eased as I recounted my story, presenting the evidence I had gathered. Marcus shifted from guarded to genuinely intrigued, sharing that the case of the missing woman, the real Sarah, was one he had been working on for months with few leads. An unlikely partnership formed between us, the desperate loner, and the grizzled detective, each driven by our own motives, but united by a common goal. Marcus revealed the existence of a network operating within the city, one that specialized in identity theft, but whose endgames varied from financial gain to more nefarious purposes. The possibility that the woman I knew as Sarah could be entangled with such a network was both terrifying and galvanizing. Our investigation led us to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a location Marcus had gleaned from intercepted communications believed to be linked to the network. The plan was straightforward: enter under the guise of a meeting, gather as much information as possible, and retreat before raising suspicion. The reality was anything but. The warehouse loomed before us, a monolith of shadows and broken windows. As we made our way inside, the air grew thick with the anticipation of danger, an unseen pressure that seemed to weigh heavily on my chest. The faint sound of voices led us deeper into the labyrinth of crates and machinery until we found the source. A small group gathered around a makeshift workstation, littered with various forms of identification and digital devices. Our presence did not go unnoticed for long. The meeting was a trap, but not for us. We had walked right into the middle of an internal dispute within the network. Chaos erupted as accusations were hurled, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gun being drawn. Marcus acted instinctively, pulling me down behind a stack of crates as the warehouse filled with the echoes of confrontation. The ensuing moments were a blur of adrenaline and fear. When the opportunity presented itself, Marcus signaled for us to make our escape, using the confusion as cover. We emerged from the warehouse gasping for air, the night air never feeling so sweet nor so bitter. Part 2 ends here. The escape from the warehouse left us both unscathed physically, but the ordeal had etched a deep scar within me. The realization that the quest for connection could so easily become a conduit for deception was a chilling revelation. Detective Marcus, despite the gruff exterior, offered a measure of solace. He assured me that while we had not captured the perpetrators or unraveled the entire web of deceit that night, we had gathered invaluable information that would aid in dismantling the network piece by piece. In the days that followed, the once coveted digital pings of my phone became harbingers of anxiety. Each notification, a reminder of the facade that had lured me into a shadowy world far removed from the genuine connection I sought. Marcus remained in contact, updating me on the progression of the investigation, but the closure I hoped for remained elusive. The network, though disrupted, operated with a tenacity that bordered on the fanatical, their motives rooted in darkness and greed. The decision to withdraw from the digital realm of dating was not an immediate one. It came gradually, as the layers of my naivety were stripped away, leaving a wariness in its place. I realized that while technology had the power to connect, it also had the power to isolate, to deceive, and to endanger. My search for companionship had led me down a path fraught with shadows, each turn revealing a new aspect of human malice that I had previously been blind to. Returning to my apartment, the scene of so many hopeful and then desperate nights, I felt a sense of finality. The digital investigation tools that had once occupied my desk had been packed away, their purpose served and then surpassed. The screens that had illuminated my room, connecting me to Sarah and the dark mystery of her disappearance, were dark. In their place, a resolve to seek connection through more tangible means, to build relationships founded on authenticity rather than digital facades. As the early morning light filtered through my window, casting a soft glow on the remnants of my online persona, I felt a weight lift. The journey had been harrowing, filled with deceit and danger, but it had also been enlightening. The Sarah I had known may have been a fiction, but the lessons learned from our interactions were painfully real. In the aftermath, I was no longer the lonely soul seeking solace online, but a determined individual, resolved to find connection in a world that, despite its darkness, also held the promise of genuine warmth and companionship. This was not the end, but a new beginning, a step into a world where connections were forged face to face, and trust was built on more than just a digital profile. It was a daunting path, but one I was now ready to take, armed with the knowledge that in the search for connection, one must tread carefully, for the shadows of deception lurk close by, ready to ensnare the unwary. In the digital age where hearts are swiped right in hopes of finding love, lurks an untold danger, more sinister than the loneliness it seeks to cure. It was under the guile of affection and shared secrets that I, Alex, had my brush with darkness, a darkness that preyed on the longing and trust of online daters like me. My adventure began innocuously enough. Charmed by a certain profile on Tinder, I found myself lost in lengthy conversations with Sophie. She was enigmatic, her stories filled with the shadows of past stalkers, a narrative that drew me in, invoking both my curiosity and my protective instincts. As our rapport deepened, a meeting seemed inevitable. So, when Sophie suggested her secluded house on the outskirts for our first in-person encounter, alarm bells were silenced by the anticipation of finally meeting the woman who had occupied my every thought. The night was quieter than usual as I made my way to the address Sophie provided. My heart raced with excitement, oblivious to the truth that awaited me. Upon entering the house, dimly lit and cloaked in silence, a creeping sense of unease washed over me. The warmth of our online interactions was nowhere to be found in the cold, almost surgical cleanliness of the interior. It was this unsettling atmosphere that led me to a door ajar, beyond which lay the first undeniable hint of the horror to come. Action Beat 1, Discovering the Surveillance Room. A soft glow emanated from what appeared to be an ordinary room. Pushing the door open, the light revealed a chilling sight, a surveillance haven with multiple monitors displaying live feeds. It was a voyeur's paradise, each screen a window into someone else's life. But these were not random strangers. They were women who, like me, sought connection in the digital expanse. My heart sank as the realization hit me. Sophie's tales of stalkers were more than mere stories. They were her confessions, twisted reflections of her own dark pursuits. Action Beat 2, The Capture. As I stood frozen, absorbing the horrifying truth, a voice shattered the silence. "I see you found my collection." Sophie's voice, once melodic and warm, now dripped with a sinister calm that sent shivers down my spine. I turned to find her blocking the door, her blue eyes no longer pools of warmth, but rather icy gateways to her twisted soul. The room, once my potential escape, became my prison. Sophie's approach was methodical, as if she relished the moment of revelation, enjoying the terror that now flickered across my face. My attempts to reason, to appeal to the person I thought I knew, fell on deaf ears. As her cold hands gripped my arms, securing them behind my back, the reality of my peril dawned. This was no date. It was a meticulously laid trap, and I had walked right into it, ensnared by the promise of connection in the void of digital intimacy. Action Beat 3, The Escape Attempt. In the dim confines of the room that was now my cell, I leaned into every ounce of fear and desperation that coursed through me. Bound and seemingly at the mercy of Sophie's twisted will, I scanned the room for any glimmer of hope, any tool that might aid in my escape. In a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate lending its hand, my eyes fell upon a shard of glass, carelessly discarded in the corner of the room. With each passing second, as Sophie reveled in her control outside, I worked tirelessly, silently, to free myself from the ties that bound me. The shard cut into the ropes and into my flesh, but the pain was a small price for the freedom it promised. Adrenaline surged as the final strand gave way, and I was free. My mind raced with plans of escape, knowing too well that timing was crucial. As the door creaked open, signaling Sophie's return, I took my chance. With a force born of primal survival, I pushed past her, racing through the unfamiliar house that was a meticulously woven web of deceit. The night air never felt so sweet as when I burst through the front door, my lungs aching with the cold, my heart pounding with the rush of escape. The darkness was no longer an enemy but an ally, cloaking my desperate departure from the horror I had left behind. Action Beat 4, Meeting Detective Lara Chen. The police station was stark, the fluorescence harsh against my exhausted eyes, but it was a sanctuary compared to the terror I had escaped. Detective Lara Chen, with her sharp gaze and no-nonsense demeanor, listened intently as I recounted the night's events, her pen never stopping across the paper. Skepticism was a shadow in her expression, a natural response to the unbelievable tale I spun. Yet something in my story, perhaps the raw terror and urgency with which I spoke, saw the skepticism give way to a dawning realization. Lara understood the gravity of what I disclosed, the intricate and horrendous web of deception and stalking Sophie had woven. "We're going to need more than just your word," she admitted, her voice steady, offering a glimmer of hope in the enveloping darkness of my ordeal. It was then I saw it, not just the determination of a detective committed to her duty, but an ally, someone who believed in the nightmare I had lived and was willing to stand beside me in the pursuit of justice. As we pored over the details once more, the weight of what had transpired began to manifest not as fear, but as resolve. Together, with Lara Chen by my side, we would tear down Sophie's facade and expose the horror lurking behind her innocent online persona. Action Beat 5, Confrontation at Sophie's Lair. With Detective Lara Chen leading, we approached the eerie house that had been the scene of my near demise. The building seemed to loom, a silent testament to the horrors it concealed within its walls. As we breached the threshold, an unsettling quiet enveloped us, the anticipation of confrontation hanging heavily in the air. Sophie was there, her back to us as we entered, seemingly engrossed in her monitors. The sight of her, so calm and collected in the midst of her tangled web of deceit, reignited the fear I had fought so hard to overcome. Yet, with Detective Chen by my side, determination coursed through me, overpowering the remnants of terror. The The moment Sophie turned, her eyes widening in surprise, marked the beginning of the end of her reign of terror. The confrontation was swift, her twisted justifications falling on deaf ears as Detective Chen cuffed her, reading her rights with a resolve that felt like the first ray of hope in what had been an endless night of despair. In the aftermath, as Sophie was led away and her victims were liberated, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The shadows that had cloaked my heart began to recede, giving way to a sense of closure and a glimmer of healing. Ending, the night when the digital web of deceit entwined with my life changed me irrevocably. The innocence I once felt towards the online world was shattered, replaced by a vigilant caution and an understanding of the darkness that can lurk behind a screen. Yet, in the depths of that darkness, I found not only the will to survive, but to fight. My story, once a testimony of terror, became a beacon for those who had suffered as I had, and a warning for those who tread the fragile line between the digital and the real. Sophie's downfall marked not just the end of her malevolent pursuits, but the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life from the shadows of my encounter. With each day, the scars left by that night become a bit less painful, a constant reminder of my strength, resilience, and the newfound resolve to protect others from falling into similar traps. As I now stand, looking back at the journey that brought me here, I realize the true horror was not just the near loss of my freedom or even life. It was the betrayal of trust, the manipulation of empathy, and the perversion of the search for connection. In sharing my tale, I hope to cast light into the dark corners of online dating, urging caution and vigilance. For in this digital age, where love and danger lie but a swipe apart, it is our stories of survival and warning that can shield unwary hearts from the echoing footsteps of a predator lurking in wait. Ever looked into a mirror and realized the person staring back wasn't you? Not in the literal sense, of course, but there, in the faint reflection, you catch glimpses of someone transformed by choices, by love sought and lost in the digital age. I found myself at this uncanny precipice one crisp autumn evening, a moment forever etched in the mirrors of my memory. My name is Alex, and my search for connection had led me to the depths of Tinder, a realm where swipes of hope often turned into ghosts of what might have been. Yet, amidst the digital sea of faces, there was one that seemed to radiate something genuine, something different. Jordan, the match that would unwittingly guide me through a journey both wondrous and harrowing. Our conversations were a tapestry of shared passions and mirrored vulnerabilities. With each message, my intrigue for Jordan deepened, their words weaving seamlessly into the fabric of my daydreams. It wasn't long before Jordan proposed a first date, but with a twist that piqued my curiosity beyond bounds, a scavenger hunt. The first clue arrived one early evening, a cryptic message leading me to an urban park painted in the golden hues of sunset. Clutching my phone, I traced the paths I'd walked countless times, but now with a sense of adventure pulsing through my veins. Beneath the watchful gaze of the weeping willow, your journey begins, the message read. As I approached the ancient tree, its branches swaying softly in the breeze, a mixture of excitement and apprehension danced in my stomach. Reaching its base, I found a neatly folded note that bore my name. Unfolding it, I read the words that would propel me further into this unfolding mystery. To the place where caffeine and ambition blend, there you'll find your next guiding friend. The cafe mentioned was no stranger to me, a sanctuary of creativity, where I'd spent countless hours hunched over my laptop, weaving stories from the threads of imagination and reality. With each step towards the cafe, a niggling unease began to take root. How did Jordan know of this place? A question that hung heavily in the crisp evening air. Stepping into the warmth of the cafe, the familiar smell of coffee embraced me like an old friend. Sitting at my usual table, I spotted another note, its presence both inviting and unsettling. This game, once thrilling, now carried an undercurrent of something far more mysterious, perhaps even sinister. Unfolding the note, my heart raced as I read the next clue, oblivious to the path I'd unwittingly begun to tread, one that would lead me to question not just the heart behind the screen, but the very essence of my pursuit for connection in this digital age. The next clue led me down memory lanes, both literal and figurative, to the outskirts of the city where my youth had unfurled like the wildflowers in spring. Where childhood dreams soared above and below, find the oak that sheltered you from storm and snow. The words struck a chord, reverberating through the chambers of memory until they settled upon one vivid image: the old oak in my childhood neighborhood. It was a guardian of sorts, under whose sprawling branches I had found refuge and imagined worlds far beyond. As I wandered through the streets that had once cradled my every adventure, the unsettling realization that Jordan knew of this place, my sanctuary, sent shivers down my spine. How? The question echoed in my mind with each step, growing louder as I neared the oak. The sight of it, majestic as ever, was now marred by the foreboding sense of intrusion. Tucked into its ancient roots was another note, and with trembling hands, I pulled it free. The playful spark of the scavenger hunt had dimmed, replaced by a gnawing apprehension of what this game had revealed about my unseen companion. The clue led me back to the heart of my present life, my own apartment. The final piece of the puzzle waits where your day ends and begins. Under the shelter of your own roof, find the reflection of your soul's twin. A chill ran through me. The playful mystery of Jordan's scavenger hunt had morphed into something altogether more invasive. The reality of someone knowing not just the cafes I frequented or the parks I strolled, but the very threshold of my private sanctuary sent panic whispering through my veins. Yet, propelled by a need for resolution and an underlying current of fear, I made my way home. My apartment greeted me with its familiar, comforting embrace, but tonight it was laced with an undertone of dread. My eyes immediately found the object that didn't belong: a beautifully crafted mirror, leaning against the wall opposite my front door. Its frame was intricate, an artwork in itself, but it was the etching on the glass that caused my heart to freeze. Find your true soulmate. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Jordan hadn't just tracked my movements or guessed at my haunts. They had invaded the deepest realms of my privacy, turning my quest for connection into a voyeuristic nightmare. The mirror, meant to reflect the truth of my soul, now only mirrored my deepest fears, of being seen yet not known, of being found yet utterly lost. My reflection stared back at me, a stranger in my own home, trapped in the gaze of unseen eyes. In the days that followed, the mirror became a haunting presence in my apartment, a constant reminder of the line that had been crossed. Each reflection seemed to echo back questions of trust, intimacy, and the shadows that lurked in the corners of digital connections. It was during one of these reflective moments that Charlie came knocking, concern etched deeply in his features as he entered my unsettled world. Sitting across from me, his voice cut through the eerie silence that had enveloped my life since the scavenger hunt ended. "Alex, this isn't just about a creepy date or an invasion of privacy," he said, the weight of his words grounding me back to reality. "It's about you understanding that not every connection is pure, not every match is a soulmate, and sometimes the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself." As Charlie spoke, his words unraveling the tightly wound fear and confusion, a transformative understanding took root. The journey Jordan had sent me on, while fraught with the shadows of deception and manipulation, had inadvertently forced me to confront my own reflections, both literal and metaphorical. In the weeks that followed, the mirror became less a symbol of my violation and more a testament to my resilience. I began to reclaim my space, my privacy, and my sense of self. The mirror, once a source of fear, now reflected back a stronger, wiser version of me. The experience had peeled back the layers of my digital naivety, unveiling the crucial lesson that in the search for connection, it was essential to guard not just my heart, but my privacy too. So I forge ahead, cautious yet hopeful, solitary, yet no longer lonely. For in the mirror's reflection, I have found not the soulmate I sought in others, but the true companion that had been with me all along, myself. The journey through digital love had led me to an unexpected destination, one where the search for connection begins not with a swipe, but with a gaze into the mirror. And as for Tinder, let's just say I'm swiping left on digital dating for a while. The real connections I've learned require something no app can offer: true reflection and self-discovery. Have you ever felt the unsettling gaze of someone watching you from the shadows, their intentions unknown, their presence unfelt, but deeply pervading every corner of your personal space? Imagine if that gaze came from someone you invited into your life, not through a door, but through the digital gateway of a Tinder swipe. In a world where digital connection often feels as tangible as the air we breathe, I found myself suffocating under the weight of superficial interactions. Tinder dates came and went like the passing of seasons, brief, predictable, and ultimately forgettable. That is until Eve. Her profile was an enigma wrapped in a riddle, no pictures, just a promise of deep, meaningful conversation and a shared love for the underrated art of horror films. I was intrigued, drawn to the mystery of her presence, or rather, the lack thereof. Our conversations unfolded like the plot of a classic thriller, each message bringing with it a sense of anticipation, a craving for the next piece of the puzzle. Her voice, heard only through the phone, had a hauntingly familiar quality, yet I couldn't place it. It was comforting and eerie in equal measure. The promise of finally meeting her, of putting a face to the voice that had become my nightly solace, was intoxicating. Eve suggested we spend our first meeting not out in the crowded clamor of the city, but in the intimate setting of my own home, watching a horror movie, a testament to our shared passion. The night before her promised visit, a subtle shift began to make itself known. Action beat 1, the disappearing objects. It started small, a book misplaced, a mug not where I had left it. I rationalized these occurrences, attributing them to my own absent-mindedness. But as the day of Eve's visit dawned, the frequency of these oddities increased. My keys, always left on the kitchen counter, were found in the living room. My phone charger, usually plugged beside my bed, vanished, only to be discovered in the bathroom. These disturbances, minor and easily dismissible on their own, coalesced into a symphony of unease, a prelude to the realization that I was not alone. Action beat 2, the whispering shadows. The evening arrived, draped in an anticipation that bordered on dread. I followed Eve's instructions, starting the movie we had agreed upon, the room lit only by the flickering images on the screen. Her absence was palpable, a void filled by the strange sensation of being watched. Then, as the protagonist on screen tiptoed through a haunted house, whispers filled my living room, commenting on the scene, detailing reactions with unnerving accuracy. The temperature dropped, a chill wrapping around me like an unwanted embrace. I paused the movie, the silence that followed both a relief and a terror. The whispers were unmistakably Eve's, her presence undeniably felt, yet not seen. How she achieved this, I couldn't fathom. But as I sat there in the dim light of my TV, the digital world's promises of connection and intimacy warped into something entirely more sinister, a prelude to the nightmare that awaited me. Action beat 3. The revealing phone call. In the days following the chilling movie night, my reality began to unravel. The whispers lingered, an undercurrent to my daily life, subtle yet unmistakable. I wrestled with the decision to confront Eve, to demand answers for the phenomena that had invaded my sanctuary. The opportunity presented itself unexpectedly late one evening when my phone rang, the caller ID flashing Eve's name. The air hung heavy with anticipation as I answered. Her voice, usually a comforting melody, now carried an edge of something dark, something otherworldly. "I've been with you longer than you can imagine," she confessed in a tone that twisted my stomach into knots. Not as a ghost, but something else, something more. The words cascaded through the phone, distorting with static that seemed to carry the weight of her true nature. Eve spoke of her omnipresence, a reality I had unknowingly accepted with every swipe, like and message, a digital Pandora's box I had opened without understanding the consequences. Action beat 4, Alex's intervention. Shaken to my core, I recounted the events to Alex, my best friend and grounding force in a world that seemed increasingly unhinged. His reaction was a mixture of disbelief and concern, his normally unwavering rationality challenged by the distress in my voice. "Don't you see? It's all digital manipulation, some sort of twisted game," Alex argued, his voice a lifeline in the storm. But the fear that had taken root within me was not easily assuaged by logic. The night evolved into a strategy session, alcohol fueling our courage and desperation. Alex, ever the pragmatist, suggested surveillance, proof to confront the inexplicable. It was a plan born of necessity, a tangible step against the unseen forces at play. We set up cameras, a digital eye to watch over me, a hope that proof would bring clarity or, at the very least, sanity. Alex's intervention, while steeped in skepticism, provided the momentum needed to face the unknown. It anchored me to reality, to the belief that there was a way out, a means to dismantle the haunting presence that Eve had become. The resolve to find answers, to reclaim my life from the shadows that whispered Eve's name, solidified with Alex's support. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, but no longer was it one I walked alone. Action Beat 5. The final escape. The surveillance footage revealed nothing. No shadows where there shouldn't be, no items moving of their own volition. Yet the whispers persisted, a constant reminder of Eve's presence. A presence felt but unseen, documented yet unprovable. It was the final straw, a realization that some forces, particularly those born of digital origins, transcended physical evidence. With my sense of safety in tatters, I made the decision to leave. Packing only the essentials, I glanced back at the apartment that had once been my sanctuary, now a prison of paranoia and fear. The whispers seemed to follow me as I locked the door for the last time, a lament for the connection that had turned into a curse. As I drove away, my phone vibrated incessantly, Eve's messages cascading one after the other, each more pleading than the last. "Don't leave. You can never truly leave," they read. With each mile, the weight of her words felt lighter, her grip loosening. I realized then that the true escape wasn't just physical. It was a disconnection from the digital ties that bound me to her. The days turned into weeks, and the whispers faded into a distant memory, a chilling reminder of the cost of intimacy in the digital age. I found solace in anonymity, a new start unburdened by the past and untraceable by Eve, or whatever she truly was. But peace is a fragile thing. Late at night, when the world is quiet and the barrier between the digital and the tangible thins, I find myself listening for the whispers, a part of me wondering if they'll ever return, if Eve will find a way back into my life. The experience left me with more than just a tale of terror. It bestowed a wary respect for the unseen connections we forge, a cautionary tale of the digital footprint we leave behind. Eve's final message haunts me still, a reminder that some connections, once made, linger in the shadows of our lives, waiting for a chance to reemerge. "Goodbye for now," it read. And in the silence that followed, I couldn't help but wonder if it was a promise or a threat.